if somebody said, here's $300 now, and a suitcase with your things, knowing what I know now, I would say, you're crazy.
We are in Minneapolis this morning with one of my favorite people in the book publishing business, Margarita Sikorskaya. I hope I said that right. Would you say it?
Sikorskaya.
And Margarita and I were brought together by Beaver Pond Press when I was working on my first children's book, Life in the Neck, New Friends. And the whole process is very interesting on how they allow me to choose an illustrator and at the same time allow the illustrator to choose me.
It kind of, they're trying to match people, you know. So they allow you to choose an illustrator. At the same time, they're sending me a story and saying, do you feel it? Are you interested? Mm-hmm. So if one of those elements doesn't work, then you'll have to choose somebody else.
So why don't you explain a little bit to us about who you are, where you came from, how you got here. We know how we got together.
Yes, well, you see, you were asking for a very long story. I don't know how short should I make it. I came from Russia. At that time it was the Soviet Union, and it was very hard to get out. But
you came from St. Petersburg?
St. Petersburg. From St. Petersburg. I was 22 years old, and that was before the Soviet Union collapsed. Actually, just maybe like 6 months before. And I was in love with this man who was already in the process of immigrating. And he left to the States, and then a year later he approached me and said, how would you like to come over and, you know, see maybe you can go to school here. Well, I came over, and 3 months later the whole thing fell apart. Mm-hmm. And he went to San Francisco, and I remained. So I basically came here with $300 and one suitcase, and somehow made it
here to the Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. It's amazing how many people, I call them like guardian angels, would appear from nowhere and just help out. I was never on the street or anything like that, but mm-hmm. you know, I had to hustle a bit, mm-hmm. You know, but it all worked out.
So basically you came over here with $300 in a suitcase.
Correct.
And started a new life.
Yes.
Basically alone then.
Absolutely alone. When I was leaving Russia, my mom said, don't you dare stay there. I said, no. And then 6 months later or so, I talked to her on the phone, and that's when things were happening in the Soviet Union mm-hmm. at that time, when there was no food to eat, there were tanks on the streets, mm-hmm. whatever, protests constantly happening. So my mom told me that it's hard for me to say that, but if you have a possibility, an opportunity to stay there longer, stay there. Mm. So here I am, 20-something years later, right? So, but no, I'm lucky I get to go and visit them, you know.
Absolutely.
Often enough, maybe, well, once a year, once 2 years. I want to make it more often, but
You know, I think it's so interesting to hear your story because, you know, we here in the Midwest, we're so sheltered, you know, from those kinds of things in the world. And
yes.
and I was when Soviet Union was going through all of that, I was an adult, but you know, it really didn't affect me until, you know, I hear you talk about it.
Right.
And then it means more to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the struggle and the whatever it was that you had to go through to get here.
Yeah. Well, I remember first time going to Lans on Lake Street here. First time going to a grocery store. I think I spent about 10 minutes there, and I had to run out because I felt nauseous.
Mm-hmm.
I have never seen that amount of food. Like, how many different cheeses do you want? It was so mind-boggling, and I think my bodily reaction was such that I just needed to leave it because I felt like it's overwhelming. I was overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, when you're 22,
No, that's true.
you don't know all the things that can go wrong, and when you don't think about things that can go wrong, a lot of the times things go right.
One of the things that really interests me is how you do your work. Can you explain that a little bit?
The way I approach stories is that I do not illustrate the words that the story says. I am creating an environment, an atmosphere. I want to bring the readers into that story emotionally. I want to connect them to the story. Not necessarily that I need to describe everything that an author is describing in words. I don't need to put all of those things in the picture. I can just have one hand in the picture, but there's something is happening. Also, I like to change depending on the emotionality of a particular part of the story. I like to change perspectives because, you know, like if somebody is above you or you know, or somebody is like this, so it changes how it feels. You know?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of how I approach those things to start with.
And I can see that in your drawings too, you know, in your illustrations that you've done for Life in the Net.
Right. Kind of, I want to create relationships between things in illustrations rather than just a description of what is going on.
The photo or the picture, the drawing, I don't know what you call it, in the book, the illustration in the book that really blew me away was the very first one when Delaney is born.
Yes, and the reflection of a mother in the baby's eye. But that's what captured me about your story. I opened the story and I've read that and I thought, yeah, I already see it. Like I immediately saw that dynamic. I saw that. Yeah.
You're giving me chills. Interesting thing about that is I have mentioned that illustration to a lot of different people that I have talked with about my book.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how children pick up that right away. They get it, you know, and I'll say, did you notice anything about Delaney's eye? Yeah, that's his mom, or that's her mom, you know, or whatever. And the children are the ones that have to kind of lead their parents into that.
Oh.
You know, sometimes the parent is not I don't think they expect that kind of artwork in a children's book.
Yes.
And so they don't look for that.
For the little tiny details,
Right.
but children are they notice
They
things.
do. They get it. They
Yeah.
absolutely get
Yeah.
it.
So, Diane, what I love about working with you is that you let me do whatever I wanted to do. You unleashed me like a wind. And that's when the best projects, the best books come, you know. Rather than telling step by step what needs to be done, what pictures you want to have, or what colors you want to have, just letting the artist take the story and add to it, you know. Otherwise, it just
That's
becomes.
beautiful.
Yes, and a lot of the times I think authors they can only imagine what can be done, what's in their heads.
Right.
They cannot imagine what I can do. And I can do a lot more than is in their heads if they let me do it, you know. And that's where the best books come from.
Well, you know what? I appreciate it.
Oh, oh, I appreciate you so much.
I love working
Thank
with
you.
you. You are the best.
Good.
Okay, well, we're here today visiting Margarita and learning about her background and her art and her beautiful illustrations that she does. And what else?
And talking.
And talking.
And talking and connecting because I haven't seen you